Well, all five of the frame-making workshops that we're currently running with clients around the world are proving both incredibly resonant and very popular. They're so well received as they're sort of bending brains and of participants in all the right and most productive ways and giving them tactics to think very differently about how they engage customers. There's one workshop in particular that seems to really jump out in the minds of the participants themselves as this is the one I'm going to go try tomorrow. I think the reason why is it speaks to probably one of the single most common challenges that we all face in B2B sales, and that is the reality that many of us are selling sort of at this level in the organization, but we need to connect our solution, connect that conversation to the priorities of maybe executives 1, 2, even 3 levels higher, so someone up here. And to do that, either we have to, as a seller or as a leader of sellers, we have to find a way to make that jump, right? We're connected here. We got to find a way to have that conversation here. Or we are talking to this person and we have to find a way to enable them or provide them the tools such that they can connect internally to their colleagues up here. And either one of those is really difficult. But what most of us are trying to do is also equally, I would argue, misguided, with huge respect. But the thing that we try to do is just figure out, all right, if we're talking to someone at this level in their language and their priorities, their metrics, what they care about, we need to equally become proficient in the language, in the metrics, and the priorities, and the perspectives of this person and speak their language too. And so thus allowing us to essentially earn the right to have a conversation with that person because we speak their language, or we can maybe equip this person to have that conversation because we've helped them speak that language. Either way, one of the things we found in our research over the years, in fact, goes all the way back to the second of the Challenger books, the Challenger Customer, and sort of the opening chapter of that book reveals one of the things that's always been so interesting about the research we've done over the years. And that is the better you get at speaking the language and positioning your offer on the merits of what each of those individual stakeholders care about at all those different levels, the less likely they are to buy a high quality, low regret purchase. Not the more likely, but the less likely. And the short version of this, there's a long version of this, it's all laid out in that book, but the short version of this is what happens is, as we get better and better at speaking the language of each of these different and disparate individual stakeholders at different levels, maybe even at different business units, functions, etc., we haven't really given them any tools to connect, not with us, but to connect with each other. And I think the better way to think about it is rather than being able to speak this language and that language, be able to connect with this stakeholder and that stakeholder, what we need to focus on is the quote unquote the connective tissue, the line of sight between these two. How do those two perspectives connect? How can we maybe not only anticipate what that connection might be, but how can we help this person here see that connection too, such that they can better engage the people 1, 2 levels up from them? Or it also works the other way around, which is if we're talking to this person, how do we help them understand the perspectives and the priorities of people 2, 3 levels down from them such that they can connect and lead their organization towards change? And that's actually what we're doing in one of our 5 workshops around what we call the OTR model, or the Objectives, Tactics, and Results model. This is all laid out in the Framemaking book in chapter 5. And the idea is that we need to understand not just what are the objectives and the tactics, the metrics, the targets, the timelines of each of these different stakeholders, but we need to understand how they nest, so that this person's objectives up here at the senior level, they have certain objectives they're trying to achieve, and they're going to achieve them through the execution of certain tactics. Well, those tactics become the objectives of the people sort of either down or out from them, and those in turn become their objectives, which then have tactics and so on. So what happens is these objectives and these tactics can ladder up and down the organization. And so what we do in this particular workshop in the Framemaking series is we actually help sellers. We provide them a framework, the OTR framework, that allows them to begin to identify and then ultimately see how these different objectives and tactics nest, how they connect to each other, such that I can not only see this and see that, but I can see a way of connecting the two. Or perhaps even equally important, when I can see this and see that and see that there's absolutely no way of connecting the two, then that raises the red flag, not for me, but for the customer, because they're going to have a hard time seeing any sort of successful execution and value realization on this if it doesn't fit in with something that's up here matters as well. It's a little bit abstract, perhaps in a 4 or 5 minute video, but in the workshop, we actually lay this out step by step by step. We have sellers begin to build these ladders specifically for their for their account that they're working on or an account that they're working on. And then equally important, we begin to use then the phrase that frames and the language that specifically can help customers not just see these sort of different connections, but feel more confident in their ability not only to understand those connections, but to convey those connections and build deeper ties across those connections such that they can essentially reach consensus more effectively, more efficiently, and with greater confidence. And again, I think if there's one thing that sellers come out of these workshops with, it's this confidence in their ability to go help customers feel confident in their ability to see and build these connections more effectively. And it's so much more effective, so much more practical than simply saying, you need to multithread, or you need to get access at a higher level, is to build a framework to actually make that happen, not just for your sellers, but for your customers, and helping you help them on that journey. And that's when really this idea of becoming a decision coach, which is the heart and soul of Framemaking, becomes so powerful, is when you actually have the tools to go make that happen.